Western Civilization. How much do you know? My name is Russell Miles, and this is the 29th episode of our Western Civilization series. Now, I've been listening to this wonderful Māori song, Pokarekare Ana. This is a love story with a powerful Māori story, but reminiscent of Western melodies. This had me pondering if I could make an entire podcast around this one song as a charming example of cultural infusion. Now, we covered this in our very first episode, with cultural infusion describing the dynamic nature of cultures and how they adapt to absorb new ideas, reflect other cultures, inventing a new paradigm. While all cultures respond to and take in others, Western culture has been especially apt at incorporating other cultures, along with imposing its system on others. We saw over this series how tombs of Eastern beliefs were incorporated, notably Judeo-Christian religion, Greek philosophies and West Asian technologies. There has also been cultural infusion from Southern or Indigenous peoples, whom were significantly impacted by Western civilization.
The origins of Pokarekare Ana remain unclear. It was arranged by Māori man Pareena Tomina in 1917. It may tell the story of Tomina's courtship of Kuna Rianina in 1912, and some of the verses composed at the time were set to a fiddler's dance tune. It was later changed to slower 4/4 time. Christian missionaries had, among other things, introduced hymn singing, and this influenced Polynesian musics which traditionally had the rhyme largely word-bound.
As part of New Zealand's effort in the Great War, Māori soldiers from different tribal areas were trained at Narrowneck, near Auckland. They apparently swapped stories, ditties and songs with each other. A contemporary form of Pokarekare Ana was being sung in the mid-1917. Pareena Tomina had presented the song at a soldiers' welfare benefit around the Bay of Plenty. The earliest documentation of Pokarekare Ana appears in an edition of the booklet A Noble Sacrifice, sold in aid of Māori Soldiers Fund, and published in 1921. This was edited by Pareena Tomina and another prominent Māori man and composer, Pareena Nagata. Neither man claimed to have composed the song, and that it was a traditional Māori story which Tomina had reworked to portray a love story between a Hawke's Bay man and an East Cape girl, with Nagata working on the melody. The song would have resonated with young men heading to war and separated from their families. In 1987, Pareena Tomina's granddaughter, Nagita Huta, asserted the family ownership of the song. This was never substantiated, but secured the copyright and so assured the fidelity of the song. Pokarekare Ana became more widely known when published by Arthur Adder and Company as a piano score in 1926. In the 1920s, Columbia Records England produced the song as a 78 revs per minute sound recording sung by Māori tenor Ernest McKinlay. There were further recordings and arrangements over the years. New Zealand is an island country in the southwestern Pacific with 2 large and over 700 smaller islands. The Māori name for the North Island is Aotearoa, which is now one of the 2 official names for the entire country. Polynesian seafarers settled the islands from the 12th century. In 1642, the Dutch explorer Abel Tasman navigated the islands, with Dutch cartographers later referring to it as Nova Zealand, after the Dutch province of Zealand. The estimated Indigenous population was about 80,000, mostly in the North Island. The locals had no common name for themselves as they identified with their tribe or clan. The term Māori, which means common or ordinary, arose from European usage to distinguish the locals. In 1769, the English explorer James Cook visited New Zealand and mapped most of the coastline. Subsequently, European and North American whaling ships were to trade with the Māori peoples. In 1788, the English established settlements around what was to be Sydney and later Tasmania, so as to have bases to dominate the South Pacific. In 1832, the English assigned an official resident, Captain William Hobson, to assert sovereignty over New Zealand. This was in response to traders and settlers arriving from New South Wales, the east coast of Australia. The issues included what was to be referred to as the Musket Wars between Māori tribes, so named as the conflicts were exacerbated by the acquisition of firearms. These savage wars saw the killing of a large proportion of the Māori population, which declined by a third. There was also conflict with Europeans. From the early 19th century, settlers from the United Kingdom began to arrive under various private schemes, with the population growing to 250,000 by 1870 and well outnumbering the Māori. Most settlements were initially in the South Island, which was sparsely populated by the Māori. The land was also ideal for sheep grazing in a period of global wool boom. Gold and other precious minerals were also discovered in the south, drawing still more settlers. The settlers built modern farms, towns, ports, roads and then railways, and soon encroached on the North Island. In 1835, the British resident and certain Māori chiefs signed the Declaration of the Independence of New Zealand, proclaiming the sovereign independence to the Māori chiefs who signed it. In 1840, the British resident Captain Hobson, along with a couple of missionaries, sought to establish a treaty with the more powerful Māori tribes in the north, and gathered 40 chiefs together who signed the Treaty of Waitangi. This replaced the earlier Declaration of Independence. This new treaty acknowledged the British Crown as sovereign. British agents took copies of the treaty to other tribes, eventually having around 500 chiefs sign. New Zealand also became a separate colony, answering to London. However, the treaty was duplicitous, as the English language version and the Māori differed in expression. While the English asserted all rights and powers of the sovereign to the Crown, the Māori believed they retained control of their land and accepted sovereignty in exchange for protection. The issue contributed to the New Zealand Wars of 1845 to 1872 and the seizing of most of the key water supplies, productive land and natural resources. In 1858, the New Zealand Colonial Parliament proclaimed the Native Lands Act, which changed traditional communal land ownership to individual land titles. This allowed the European class to use their economic power to break up land holdings and further devastate the Māori culture. Chatham Island, also known as Recue, is in the South Pacific Ocean, 650 kilometres southeast of New Zealand's South Island. In 1781, the island group was located by the British ship HMS Chatham. The island is 80 square kilometres and was a home to about 1,000 people. They are referred to as the Māori people and probably arrived from the New Zealand mainland around 1500. Their distinctive culture had developed from rich sea resources in a very constrained environment and was a highly cooperative society. The Māori people were to become a curiosity for European anthropologists and a terrible symbol of New Zealand's violent history. The Māori people were impacted by introduced disease from whaling and other trading ships. Then in 1835, about 900 Māori from the North Island travelled by a European sailing ship Lord Rodney, which they had commandeered. The Māori people were said to have reluctantly accepted the new settlers. However, the Māori attacked, killing over 260 locals and enslaving survivors, mostly women and children. The Māori forced the women to marry their men, took some to the mainland. This led to the heartbreaking myth that Chatham Islander people and their culture had been destroyed. In the 1960s, the New Zealand government had offered financial inducements for families to move to the mainland, so further depleting cultural links. However, survivors descended from former slaves struggled to keep their cultural memory alive. In the 1980s, with the mood for national reconciliation growing, the then Prime Minister David Lang came to champion recognition of the great wrong done to the Māori people. This included unveiling a statue to Tommy Solomon, a notable Māori man, in 1986, a celebration to the Māori people. In recent years, Māori descendants have been granted traditional fishing rights to the exclusion of those descended from the Māori invaders. The national response and conciliation to New Zealand's violent history was to be complex and challenging. Our next podcast will look at the various renditions and growing popularity of Pokarekare Ana within the above social and political contexts, including how it traversed the globe. If you like this channel, please subscribe and tick like. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I can be contacted at email russmills@iprimus.com.au. Thanks for listening.